When did the class clown take it too far? Pulled out a chair from underneath the kid thinking it would be really funny when the kid fell. The kid ended up falling and cracking his head open and getting around 30 stitches. I did this to a kid in middle school and he hit his head on the metal part of the chair. The teacher was like walking down to the nurse while he was walking slowly and holding his head acting super hurt. I felt like an asshole. Then we got out of the room and he was like, "Ah, I'm fine, fuck you." He got me. Edit, look, I'm not proud of this but he didn't die. I was 12, and we were watching Space Jam in class that day so I was extra hype. Senior year. Teacher wouldn't give her a hall pass to use the bathroom, which was ridiculous. Instead of taking a more conventional stand, like walking out of the room, she sat down in her desk and pissed her pants. She was suspended, I forget for how long. There were editorials back and forth in the school paper. I was on team teachers shouldn't try to control our bowels but also maybe don't piss on the floor, though I do appreciate your taking one for the team. He loaded up porn on someone's computer while they were in the bathroom. Teacher wasn't paying attention and the victim ended up getting suspended. That wasn't a class clown, that was a classroom hitman. Junior year in high school in Algebra 2, the teacher was kind of a douche so this one guy, let's call him Mike, would give him a hard time. This was a regular thing, and Mike would get kicked out of class for saying and doing some inappropriate stuff but we all thought it was hilarious. One day, our teacher didn't show up to class. Word got around that his oldest son had died of a drug overdose and he had to take some personal time off. He didn't show back up until a week later and he looked really sullen and down. During class, Mike pulled out a can of Coca-Cola and started sipping it nonchalantly. Teacher had a strict no eating or drinking in class policy and Mike was aware of this. He told Mike to throw it away and step outside. Mike, the absolute fucking savage, says, "Look, I know you don't like Coke, but I'm sure your son did." Nobody laughed. Just silence. Some people didn't get it. The ones who did were just too shocked to say anything like me. Mike threw his drink away and walked out of the classroom while the teacher just sort of haphazardly continued his lesson, although we could tell Mike's comment fucked him up. My story is pretty similar. The teacher was one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Really upbeat and always wanted to help out. His son wound up getting bullied a lot and committed suicide. When he came back, our class clown made a really bad joke remark about how it was the teacher's fault that his son killed himself. Our teacher got up, walked over to the kid's desk and stopped. The kid tried to make another jab, but the guy pulled the kid out of his seat and started pummeling him and throwing him against anything he could see. Nobody in the class moved, just watched as it happened and saw this snarky kid sobbing, bleeding and just getting destroyed. Our teacher stopped, walked out of the room and we never saw him again. Apparently there were a bunch of lawsuits and the kid had to go to the hospital for a bunch of wounds, but it was definitely the most intense class I've been a part of. There was a class clown in my class and another one from the senior class at the time. They'd collaborated to throw toilet paper all over the schoolyard as a joke. I forget exactly what it was, but there was some kind of very important event going on that day and we were supposed to have a lot of visitors that afternoon. The principal was not amused. He said if they'd done that on any other day, he'd probably just let it go after making them clean it up. They got detention and one of the teachers made them personally apologize to the elderly janitor who had to clean that shit up in the dark when it was freezing cold. Edit, the janitor found the mess when he'd gotten to school that morning while it was still dark around 6 a.m. or so. He started cleaning it up himself, before anyone knew who did it. The office pulled the footage from the outdoor security cameras later that morning. Because it was such a small school, those dudes were identified in about 30 seconds. Lamau. Ha ha ha, old Gary, well he always used to tease this gay kid and everyone dared him to kiss him as a dare. The fucker is still running the joke today, even got married to him. Gary knows how to do the long haul when he takes things too far. Can't wait until the big joke reveal and everyone laughs. Classic Gary, doesn't know when to quit. Had a friend in high school, always would invite me to his parties. He was a popular guy on the wrestling team, and I was not. So he was always trying to hook me up with chicks. Anyways, went to a few of the parties and each were more crazy than the next. The final one he had was insane, hundreds of people. Went upstairs to check on him because he'd had a lot to drink. Passed the bathroom where some guys were popping Molly, then went to his room. As I was about to knock, he opens the door, looks me dead in the eyes and says I just got fucked in the ass with the most pale and wild expression. Instantly I ask him if he's okay. A split second later he just flips his mind and expression to being the charismatic jock that he is. The other guy was another ladies' man jock on the football team. He came up to me a few days later and laughed it off like it was a joke and was like, what happened at the party stays at the party. Lol, just clowning around I guess. Both are now happily married to women. I can only imagine how they initiated that. When I was in 3rd grade we were all doing our thing, coloring, reading, etc. The class clown was being really noisy and kept goofing off. We were all having fun and the class clown eventually sat down. It wasn't long before he was laying on the floor, foaming out of his mouth, shaking violently. We all laughed. It was a joke, right? Before long the teacher came rushing over to see the new joke the kid came up with. She immediately called 911 and he was rushed out of the room. He had a seizure while the whole class thought he was joking. He recovered and everything was fine. I just feel bad for the kid. Kid, class clown, in elementary school made fun of a boy no one liked. He was kinda an asshole, but one day the boy said his mom had a miscarriage and the other kid thought it would be a great insult. Later in the week to tell him something along the lines of your brother is better off dead, it's a good thing your mom had a miscarriage. Don't think we've ever rallied for this asshole kid as hard as we did that day. Not cool. Kid in my band class still thought yo mama jokes were funny. We came back to school for the first time after Hurricane Sandy, and the kid goes to the teacher, yo mama s, and the teacher cuts him off, died in the hurricane. The kid never told another one of those jokes in that class. I was at an all-state music festival, basically a concert band that students from the entire state auditioned to perform in during high school. And during some downtime between pieces during the rehearsal, the conductor asked if anyone wanted to come up and say a joke into the mic. One of the percussionists raises his hand, walks up, and tells the following joke. What do you call a kid with no friends? A Sandy Hook survivor. I absolutely could not believe what I heard. This was just weeks or maybe a few months after the shooting. I don't remember if anyone laughed, I don't think they did. And he definitely got a stern talking to. My sophomore year of high school, it was in English class and there were 4 class clowns in the same class. Second semester of school, so it was shortly after I'd been switched from one teacher's class to the new one. During the first semester, there was a student a grade below us that had committed suicide, and the year before that my cousin had done the same. Teacher walked out of the classroom to take something to get printed or something and left the only senior in the class in charge. Both she and I were close to the deceased freshman's family and had struggled with his death together. Not a minute after the teacher left, 2 of the clowns got up and went over to the windows, grabbed the pull string to the blinds, and used it as a noose to hang themselves. Some kids laughed, some kids told them to knock it off. A few just wanted to finish their worksheets, but I had to leave the classroom and I passed the teacher in the hall. She saw I was crying and asked what happened. I was trying to explain while sobbing when the senior came out after chewing the clowns a new one and explained to the teacher what had happened. She actually escorted everyone except the clowns out of the classroom so she wouldn't disturb the other classes around us with how much and how loudly she yelled at them. It's interesting to hear suicide stories from other perspectives. At my school we had many suicides, and at one point a person at my lunch table who I was close with had his family murdered in front of him by his uncle. He survived by luck alone. No reason he should still be alive. The immediate reaction of all of us who knew him was to start making as many dark jokes as possible about the situation within a day of it occurring, while he also made jokes himself. But in an odd way, there was an unspoken understanding that the jokes were only okay because we all knew him. People who didn't know him were frowned upon by those who did for making similar jokes. I don't really have a takeaway from all of this. Just figured I'd share since your story brought up the memory. On a lighter note, it was always fun to see the look on a teacher's face when making really dark jokes about his recently murdered parents brought him genuine joy. He was just happy to share an origin story with Batman. There's a few interesting studies out there about how guys in modern Western societies subconsciously understand that to show vulnerability is looked down upon. So in group settings they mask their vulnerabilities with humor and occasionally dominance games. An example of this might be Gay Chicken, where straight men will perform homosexuality as a joke. The joke disguises male intimacy. And because everyone understands no one involved is actually gay, as far as they know, the behavior is excused where otherwise it might be seen as creepy or not masculine. Making jokes is a way of processing grief, shock, and fear in a way that your friend and your group might not have been able to otherwise. But that only works if it's limited to people who were actually affected by it, i.e. the group. If an outsider made a Batman joke, it's no longer a way to process this terrible thing that happened to your friend, it just becomes this mundane thing and the event is belittled. I knew a guy, high school student in the late 60s. He and his best friend were very close, but had also dated the same girl. My buddy dated this girl first, now the friend was dating her. No problems, but they both understood how this could be perceived as a potential friendship ender. They had a joke all planned out. The best friend grabbed some ketchup packets from a fast food restaurant. After lunch, he was sitting in class with the packets torn slightly, tucked unnoticeably in his hand. My buddy had the starter pistol from the track and field team. You see where this is going. My buddy ran into the classroom and shouted, "You can't steal my girl from me. If I can't have her, no one can." He fired the starter pistol, filled with blanks, not bullets, in the direction of his best friend. The friend, who had jumped up from his desk during the shouting, clutched his chest from the fake bullet wound, sending horrifying streaks of red ketchup flying all over his white t-shirt. He collapsed. The look of horror on the face of every student in the room, my buddy said, was amazing. He and his best friend both got detention. Sometimes I think about this story, and I wonder what would happen if high school students tried this in a post-Columbine world. It's crazy how much times change in just a couple of generations. In 4th grade, we had a kid who disrupted class all the time because he couldn't keep still. It had snowed and we were walking around the room doing an assignment. The teacher went to the class next door for a minute. This kid ran out the door to the field, right outside the door, made a snowball and threw it in the classroom, hitting a huge light bulb which exploded, sending glass everywhere. Everyone screamed, teachers came running in, and we never saw that kid again. This was in the 70s, so they probably drugged him up and put him in a different school. In my English class we all tried to be class clowns most of the time. However, the one time my friend took it too far was when at the end of the class, the teacher would go round picking up all the textbooks from each table while we stood waiting. When the teacher came round to collect his textbook, she lifted it up and my friend had unzipped his trousers and put his wanga through and hidden it under the book. She screamed and everyone else was so shocked at the sight of him stood there with his wanga flopped out on the table, but before anyone could say anything, he looks down and pretends to scream in fright as well, as if he did not know what he was looking at, as he lifts his arm up and proceeds to karate chop his own penis in front of my teacher and entire class. The lad got excluded for a day and got put in a new English class. This is a true story, BTW. There was a class clown who makes pretty good jokes and is all around a respected person. They recently have been dropping roasts on people in their jokes, so people are starting to dislike them. The one thing that they said to ruin everyone's respect was making fun of the teacher. Usually people would find it funnier because it's somebody a general doesn't like to begin with, but this was way too far. The teacher was asked if she was a Cubs fan and she said she is because her dead uncle, who was the nicest person she ever met, was a die-hard Cubs fan. The class clown then exclaimed, "He was such a die-hard fan that he died hard." This was so bad that the teacher started crying and dismissed us early so she could get better. TL, Doctor, class clown made fun of teacher's deceased uncle and made them cry.
In this little shop of horrors, that's how we get down. Yeah, enter, the projects on the prairie, scary. We two at the gate with Bloody Marys. Blood, a rail full of blood. Back to the cemetery, get more blood. Standing on the grave, drinking blood, smoking bones. We seen a crew of ghouls running by with stolen tombstones. With Hell's Angels on the chase, they lost the bus, a black skull, want you embrace. They tie you up in chains and they stomp on your face. They go to purgatory and they beat the fucking case. I look around, mad bodies being